Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Tom Jensen. It is a little early to start talking about spring, but not spring turkey season. My guest this week is Aaron Robinson. Aaron is the upland game bird supervisor for the Game and Fish Department. We're going to talk about turkeys in North Dakota in general. Also, Aaron, applications now for the spring turkey lottery are available and they're due
February 10th. So that's when people need to get their application in by so they can get in for the drawing for the lottery. Depending on where they're at in the state, we have multiple units that they'll have to put in for.
Okay. How are populations just in general doing in North Dakota?
Yeah, so the last few years, about the last 5 years, we've seen a pretty big decline in our population from what it was, say, back in 2008 and 9, and even 10. After those bad winters, we had a big decline in our population, and even since then, it seems like our turkey population has just struggled to really come back to that level. But at that time, we had probably more turkeys than we really needed. We were getting a lot of landowner complaints at that time, so we're still trying to find that happy medium of providing hunting opportunity with not having nuisance problems across the state with turkeys. But I guess the bottom line is they've had a pretty poor hatch in a lot of areas of the state. Some states have slowly, some units have started to come back slowly, and we've been able to increase some tags in those units, but others have really declined. So it's not the same across the board. Sure. In North Dakota.
Obviously, areas with better habitat are doing better.
Yeah, you know, our turkey population is linked very closely to our river corridors and our riparian corridors in terms of the Missouri River corridor and the Heart River, you know, some of that area in the west, and then we also have a good population out in the Badlands. But if there's not some sort of tree roosting cover for these birds, you usually don't find them.
You have areas, obviously, that are doing great because of the habitat, others that aren't doing so well.
Yeah, and again, I think habitat issue with turkeys up to this point hasn't been the big limiting factor. I think a lot of it has been based on weather. We've had some really wet springs and the production has been poor, and then we had those bad winters, and that we had some pretty significant overwinter kill from some of those. So right now, I think as we get better weather conditions, and obviously last winter and this winter are mild winters basically, so we're optimistic with some good nesting conditions this spring, we'll get another bump in our population and we might be able to increase those tags a little bit more next year.
Let's talk about the season that's coming up itself. What can hunters expect?
You know, I think if you're lucky enough to draw a tag in your preferred unit, there's plenty of opportunity. I think we have been a little bit conservative in some areas where we want hunters to have high success, and if you put in the time and the effort, do some scouting, you should have a great opportunity. And our population or our hunting is a little bit different than some of the southern states where they start quite a bit earlier. So our season starts April 9th, and other states in the southern tier of the United States, those seasons usually start earlier because that spring displaying time usually kicks in a little earlier. As the snow recedes and the light, and we get more light across the landscape, that kicks those birds into that displaying activity. And so ours is a little bit later, and so sometimes it's even more effective if you're a hunter to go out later in the season than those opening couple weeks, because you get a better opportunity, and some of those toms are a little bit more vocal later in the season. So
you mentioned toms now. This is a toms only season, and we have a good reason for that.
Correct. The spring season is primarily males or bearded turkeys. The reason is you know, we feel like they're getting enough, we're not harvesting enough males to impact the breeding population. So the hens are getting covered, they're able to get bred so that they can have a clutch. The season that really influences the swing in population size is our fall population, or our fall season, because that's when we can harvest essentially any turkey, and we're harvesting females at that time. And obviously when you harvest females, you're potentially impacting your population.
Now, you have a few units in North Dakota. The license availability is up. You also have a couple of units where license availability is down.
Correct. You know, the very far southeast part of the state, Unit 37, we've had to decrease that by about 75 permits. Last year we had 675. This year it's going to be decreased to 600. The data that we have, and which is limited, shows that our production hasn't been very good in that part of the state. Now, there's some units along the Missouri corridor, north of here by Washburn and even up by Williston, that we have increased slightly by up to maybe 25 permits in those units. Overall, though, if you look at statewide, we haven't really increased statewide across, for our tag numbers.
You have some areas in the state, if someone puts in for the lottery and they don't get drawn, you actually have some units where you have leftover tags.
Yeah, typically we have, that last year that was more difficult to get those leftover tags. We seem to sell out faster last year than we have in the past. And I think it's just a lot of people are keying into how fun it is to hunt turkeys in the spring, and we've had a lot of influx of people, especially in the western part of the state, who are coming from southern states where turkey hunting is tradition. And so, we typically have a few leftover tags, but I don't know if we will this year. It just depends on how many applications we get. Some of those western units usually have a few left over.
We've had a pretty mild winter so far. If we keep our fingers crossed, hopefully for the rest of the winter, we'll have one of those winters that really contributes to expanding the populations.
Yeah, indications from just talking to landowners and talking to people who have been out in the landscape, turkey numbers are looking pretty decent this year. So it might be a really good year where opportunity will abound and people will have plenty of chances to get on a tom. And hopefully, like you said, with a mild winter and good nesting conditions this spring, next year we can increase those tags to provide more hunters opportunity.
All right, Aaron, thanks. As Aaron mentioned, the deadline to apply for the Spring Turkey Lottery is Wednesday, February 10th. There are a number of ways you can apply. The easiest is to fill out an application online at the Game and Fish website at gf.nd.gov. You can also get your hands on the lottery application form at sporting goods stores and licensed vendors across the state. Fill it out, send it in with your check for the $15 application fee, or you can apply over the phone by calling 800-406-6409. For Aaron Robinson and the rest of the staff here at North Dakota Game and Fish, thanks for joining us for Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.